Once a month, when the moon reaches its highest point in the sky and the wild creatures call out to the night, he emerges from a private sanctuary in an undisclosed location outside of Little Rock, Arkansas. Arrayed in his priestly vestments, carrying forth the good news that comic books and graphic novels aren't just for kids, that they aren't just mass and spandex superheroes, that storytelling in a graphic format can be so much more. He is the graphic novel apostle.
Hello and welcome back to the Graphic Novel Apostle podcast. I'm your host, Mark Orenberger, and I am so happy to be here with you as always. And today we have a returning guest from one of our earliest episodes back to the show. I want to welcome back my friend, Hinojosa. Hannah, welcome back.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here.
And if you guys haven't heard it yet, you know, I often refer to episodes as maybe my favorite episode or one of my favorites. And I got a lot of favorites that I love. I've been happy with this show. But this was a very early episode. It really has been one of my favorites all throughout. Hannah came on episode 11, and we talked about a book called Art Brut. And Hannah was the perfect guest to have on for that episode. At the time, Hannah was a middle school art teacher.
Yep.
Which you are not anymore.
No, I am not.
And we're going to talk about what she's into now. She's gotten into a different area of art still being the full-time business, but doing something really, really cool with pottery. But it was particularly helpful to have Hannah for the book Art Brut because that book dove into a lot of different art styles. And Hannah brought a ton of art history and, what would be the word, Hannah? Like art style.
Yeah, like art history, kind of like training, like knowing what some of the different styles are, probably. Just kind of like recognizing, oh, I know which artist that is.
Yeah, and then just discussing about some of those different schools and approaches to art that, you know, that the artist on that book, Martin Morazzo, had kind of copied their styles or worked in their styles a little bit and then also featured some of their fine art pieces that people recognize.
Yeah, it was really fun to like look through all the pages and recognize things that I had seen when I was studying art history in college or when I was like teaching my students. I was like, oh, I know that artist. It's fun to see.
Well, I thought that added so much, there was just so much extra on the table that you were able to provide when you did that episode with me. So it's one I still look back on and love. Today we are going to talk about, and actually I would encourage people to go back and listen to episode 11, it was a book club episode with Hannah, where we did Art Brut. And at the end of that episode, Hannah reached into her bag and handed a stack of books to me across the table, which I did not know she was going to do. And she said, hey, next time I get a chance to come on this podcast, let's talk about this manga that I like. And so today we're going to talk about volume 1 of that book, Fruits Basket.
Yeah.
That was such a fun thing. I'm glad you did it. And Hannah, it took me forever to get to it. You know, my to be read pile is always bigger than it should be. And I had those books sitting there, and also I was probably a bad friend who borrowed a book and kept it for a year.
It's okay.
But it's back in your hands now.
It is back in my hands.
But before we get into Fruits Basket, let's talk about the Arkansas Potter.
Okay.
Tell us.
So I am the Arkansas Potter. Got lucky and found a really good name that wasn't used yet. But I have switched from teaching art to now I'm doing art as my full-time job. I'm making YouTube content and posting on Instagram. And I also have a website where I sell my artwork online. And as you could guess, it's all pottery made by me here in Arkansas.
Yeah, and those videos that you're making and putting on YouTube, and I actually usually more often see them as Instagram reels, but a lot of those are some level of instruction.
Yeah.
Or just explanation.
Yeah.
You had one you did recently where, I'm going to get the name of the machine wrong.
Pug mill.
A pug mill, okay.
Pug mill,
and
yeah.
you were explaining the inside of this pug mill and how you would, and that's one for making the clay itself.
Yeah,
correct?
So I am doing a series that I call 2-Minute Terms Day on YouTube, and each one I try to cover around 3 words that are common to potters, but maybe if you're new or a hobbyist, like you may not know what all these things do, and so the pug mill is part of the clay making or clay reclaiming process. And yeah, I just thought, some of the words will be real common and easy to figure out, but a pug mill, that's kind of niche, a little bit harder to understand or picture in your head if you haven't seen one.
I know a pug. but pug mill looked different than what
Oh,
what
yeah.
I had imagined. Now, I will forget if we leave this to the end, and I'll be rude to do it. So let me go ahead and get this now. Where can people find you on YouTube first?
Okay, so all of my channels, I try to keep it consistent, are Arkansas Potter. So like my website is arkansaspotter.com, my Instagram is Arkansas Potter, and my YouTube is Arkansas Potter. So it's just real easy. Search me, you'll find me.
Well, and you've got some gorgeous pieces.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I've been so happy to see the stuff that you're making, and I don't know, I just always excited to see one of my friends do something and be successful with it, and also just to do something really, really well.
Thank you.
Well, absolutely. Thank you. Well, Hannah, I don't mind to dip my toes into manga a little bit because it's another, a close, maybe kissing cousin to the American comic book style or the Western comic book style,
Yeah.
I guess would be a better way to say it. I don't know that I'm quite ready to start throwing clay and spinning a wheel. The guy who is in the office next door to me at work is a pottery hobbyist.
Oh,
and
yeah.
He'll go at lunch and he'll come back once in a while and he'll tell you in the morning, I'm gonna go throw clay for a while.
Oh, man.
And he comes back and he'll have a little of the dusty stuff on his pants or whatever, but he's happy for the afternoon after that.
Oh, yeah. It's so good. Most people who like just take a class or just do it as a hobby, it feels cathartic because you can make something or you can ruin something. And they're both equally satisfying.
Well, that's great. Now, in addition to your interest, of course, in pottery is manga.
Yeah.
How did you get into manga and like sort of what point in your life did you discover it?
So I'm really late to the game, actually. I grew up kind of like hidden under a rock. And so I discovered this manga specifically because I watched the anime.
Okay.
And that was my first, not my first anime, but the first one where I got to the end of the story and I was like, I feel like there's more. And like sometimes you watch a movie and the movie feels like there's more plot here. Mm-hmm. You could go find a novel. Mm-hmm. So I was like, what else can I find? And I found the manga series and I was very excited because there's a lot more.
Cool. So what age are we talking about here?
Oh, I was married.
Oh, okay. This is adulthood.
This is way after college.
Yeah, okay. Part of my question, I guess, really is because whenever that was, I mean, this would be in the 2000s at some point.
Yeah.
And this was not a new book at that time, Fruits Basket. And just to give people a little bit of the credits for the background for what we're talking about here. So the manga series Fruits Basket was written and drawn by Natsuki Takaya.
I think it might be Takaya.
Oh, okay.
But it's Japanese. It's hard.
And apologies to Natsuki if we have mispronounced your name. But it was published by Tokyopop here in the U.S. Of course, it had been published first in Japan in 1999 by a publishing company called Hakusensha Inc. And this is what genre would you even put this story into?
Actually, that gets us into a really interesting
part. Well, then, you know what? Take us away.
So manga, one thing that I've learned from reading different manga is that they don't categorize their stories the same way that we do here in the West. I don't know how consistent that is. I think it may be manga specific, but their genres are categorized by target audience.
Okay.
So this is shoujo manga. It's for girls to young women.
Okay.
Whereas there's also 3 other categories for boys and young men, and older men and older women, or just adult. What
are those?
So it usually is centered around who the main character is. Mm-hmm. If the main character looks like you, it's for your age.
Okay, I see.
So usually the ones for women are featured around a woman, or if it's for a man, it's featured around a man. And then they have genres within that, but this is like romance / fantasy, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know that the word fantasy would have come to mind.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing is that Japanese imagination and like folk stories and like the way that they perceive magic or talk about the word like demon in Western culture has a very specific like devilish implication, whereas
Sure.
a demon in Japanese culture is more like a magical being.
Sure. Yeah, so there's absolutely some cultural translation
Yeah.
that you have to do. And I will tell you, as much as I enjoyed reading Fruits Basket, I could tell as I was reading through that there were lots of things that are cultural references that I just don't get.
Yeah.
And it would make the story fuller for me if I did. And in fact, I almost wonder, maybe you can tell me, I almost wonder if for an American audience who is not nearly as familiar with the Japanese culture, either pop cultural references or just general cultural references, do they do any kind of like annotated versions of these?
Yeah, so a lot of manga, and this actually, Fruits Basket, the edition that I have, is kind of an exception to the rule. A lot of other manga I have at the back will have like a list of terms that maybe you don't know as a Western reader. And it'll also have explanations of honorifics, which are a really big deal in Japanese, but are like Mr. or Miss for us. And we just drop them so casually, whereas in Japan, how you address somebody says a lot about who you are and who they are. And so that stuff is actually explained in the back of a lot of them.
Okay. And, I actually did a fair amount of Googling as I was reading through because, I mean, I'm familiar with the honorific san, as I've heard it. And I want to say, and it's mostly through movies that I'm familiar with that, where I've heard it applied to men, and I understood it like Mr.
Yeah.
And I think there were times where Toru, the main character of this story, who was a girl, was addressed as Toru-san. And so apparently that can be used for either males or females.
Some of their honorifics are gendered.
Okay.
But they're not gendered the way that ours are. They're more commonly used for a woman, but they're not strictly used for a woman.
Oh, how interesting.
So, you might have noticed they call one of the other characters Kyo-kun. And that last part, the kun, is a honorific that means like my equal or like a cute younger person.
Okay.
And is more common to do to girls.
Okay.
But there's also a lot more like cutesy honorifics go to girls.
Okay.
And boys grow up faster and they get more honorable honorifics faster.
Okay. Huh. It's funny. Kun was one that I actually had in my notes because I had looked it up, and what the result Google gave back to me was that it meant like friend or buddy.
Yeah.
Which it sounds like the connotation is a little narrower than just somebody who's your friend. It's more of a diminutive, it sounds like.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of differences in you have to call somebody who's older than you a more honorary title, and somebody who's younger than you can get one that's more diminutive.
Gotcha. Okay. And, to the extent we have any Japanese audience or audience of Japanese descent or extraction, please forgive us if we get any of this mixed up, because this is not a native culture for either one of us.
Right.
But fortunately, you are a little more learned than I am, and I appreciate that.
Honestly, everything I've learned has been from the wonderful notes at the back of many manga or my own Google searches. So I don't have a lot of knowledge from anybody who's firsthand.
Sure. So the copy of Fruits Basket that you loaned to me is Fruits Basket Volume 1, and it's got chapters 1 through 4 in it.
Yes.
And, it's easy for me to understand when you hand me a book like this, and of course we're talking mostly to a comic book audience that's listening. It is easy for me to go, okay, I get what this volume is. It's like our American trade paperbacks that might collect issues 1 through 5 or issues 1 through 4 of a comic that I would have picked up monthly in the shop. But I've never seen like what we call floppy, monthly comics in manga. And I figured they were out there someplace, and I just, they don't sell them at the comic book store I go to. But you were explaining that they're published in a little bit of a different way than that.
Yeah. So for us, I think manga doesn't come to us to like an American or an English speaking audience. It doesn't get translated unless it gets, I don't know what the word is, but I kind of think of like syndicated.
Okay.
Unless it gets turned into volumes in Japan, then it doesn't get translated. But there's probably a lot more manga out there that we never see because it comes out in what's called a magazine, but it's when you look up pictures of like manga magazines, it looks like a collection of novels because they're thicker books. But each book will contain like 15 to 20 chapters in it, but the chapters are each for a different story, probably by different artists.
Sure. So every magazine is an anthology, except the anthologies are sequential. So if I bought the magazine that chapter 1 of Fruits Basket came out in, there would be maybe a dozen other chapter 1s in that same magazine.
Yeah, and I don't know if you would have stories coming out at different points. If you would have a chapter 1 of one and chapter 5 of another.
Oh, wow, okay.
Or if they would all be the same. I never thought about it.
Sure, but specifically if I wanted to keep following Fruits Basket, I'd go back to that same magazine in the next issue.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll be the same stories, maybe not.
Yeah, and I think this one came out in a magazine called Shoujo Beat.
Okay.
If you look at the back of that book, it might say on there. But I also don't know if that's just like an Americanization or an English translation.
And I don't see, but that sounds familiar from reading the front and back material in the book.
Yeah. So there will be different magazines, and they'll have multiple chapters, but they're not all the same story. And yeah, you would buy the weekly or monthly editions to keep following your same story.
How interesting. Okay. I really like that.
Yeah. I kind of wish that there were opportunities for me to read more things like that, because then you can kind of dip your toe into reading something, and maybe there's like 2 stories that you really want to follow, but one that you just skip.
Yeah. Well, in the last 2 years, of course, this has always been around in American comics, but I've seen it more in the last, say, probably 2 years. There have been a number of publishers that have done anthology horror books, and those have contained a mix of both serialized stories that are being carried through month to month and little one-off short stories, basically.
Oh, how cool.
I thought that was pretty fun of a way to do that. And so, when I pick up Hello Darkness issue 3, I'm getting both the 3rd chapter of this story out of Something is Killing the Children, and also probably a short story, or 2 others that someone else did. Yeah, that was pretty cool. And then you have a larger collected volume there as well, which is... Go ahead and explain that to me.
So it was really strange to me when I first started reading manga and I picked up the 2nd volume, and instead of starting at chapter 1, it started at chapter 5. Because the chapters are continuous. And after understanding that they were printed one at a time in these magazines, it made a lot more sense.
Sure.
And then what I have here is a collector's edition that combines the first 2 original volumes into one new volume.
Okay.
So
more like our omnibus that we have in the United States.
Yeah, but I think Fruits Basket is too long to be one omnibus.
Sure. Well, you know what? We do that in American comics too with the omnibus, and it always cracks me up because when I first was getting into comics, I went and picked up the, it was some character, the complete collection or something, and I thought, oh, cool. I got it all right here. I would have thought there were more of this character in comics, and as I was reading through it, I was like, this is the complete collection, volume 1. So it was the incomplete collection.
Right.
But I guess you've got something similar there with the manga. So outside of Fruits Basket, what were there others that you kind of followed on with that you started really getting into manga?
So I think the next ones that I read were probably Toradora. I do like a lot of the shoujo manga. It's the romance stories with the girl as the main character. Just speaks to me a little bit.
Sure. Well, let's talk about Fruits Basket and the characters that we're going to follow here. And so let me just lay it out a little bit, just introduce you to some of the main characters. And then, Hannah, this is going to be very different from some of our other book club episodes because you're in the driver's seat. We're going to let you tell the story here. But Toru Honda is the main character. She's an orphaned high school girl. And when we first meet her, she's living on her own in a tent out in the woods, which is a very odd way to be introduced to a character. Next is a character named Yuki, also known as Shoma-kun. And we talked about that kun meaning friend or buddy or, kind of my little friend, something like that. Yuki is also sometimes called by the other kids at school the prince.
Yes.
And he's thought to be one of the most handsome boys in the school.
So one thing that I've noticed in manga and anime is the prince is like the most popular guy.
Okay.
The most attractive guy. So I think our most similar kind of thing would be the quarterback.
Okay. And Yuki is from a family named Soma.
Soma.
Sohma. Sohma. And so there are going to be several other members of the Soma family that we're introduced to. So one is going to be his older cousin, Shigure Soma. And another is going to be Kaio Soma. And, I'm probably saying this backwards, too, because Soma being the last name, I guess in Japan, that would be Soma Kaio.
Yeah, and his name is Kyo.
Kyo, I beg your pardon, Kyo. And another member of that family as well that we're going to be introduced to not until the very end of Chapter 4, so at the end of our story today, is Kagura Soma. And this is a family with an interesting, unusual backstory.
Yes.
That Hannah's going to tell us about in just a minute.
Okay.
And while we've been talking here so much about Japanese culture and things we need to understand about Japanese culture to understand the book, there's actually a main ingredient in this particular book that is taken from Chinese culture.
Yeah.
And that is, a lot of this book centers around the Chinese zodiac and the zodiac, like the stories behind the individual characters, I guess, from the animals that are represented within the Chinese zodiac.
And in reading this manga and like loving the story so much, I've learned a lot that there are Japanese and other Asian culture adaptions of the zodiac. And so like where one might call like the year of the boar, another would call it the pig. Okay. Or like they might replace an animal with a different one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
But here they're referencing specifically it being the Chinese zodiac.
Yeah.
And our main character, Toru, when she was a little girl, she used to, in going to bed at night, her mother would tell her stories of the Chinese zodiac. And she really loved those, and they were important to her. The way this is introduced to us is, I told you a moment ago, Toru is stepping out of her tent in the morning in her school uniform, like she's just getting ready to go off to school. And, so we're confused as to why is this girl, on her own. And also the way she's drawn, I think she reads a little younger than a high school girl, but apparently we learned that that's what she is. Yeah. I would have, put her more at like a middle school age probably. And she is, before school on the morning of the first day of the book that we're reading, she is kind of wandering through this wooded area that is near where she has pitched her tent. Mm-hmm. And we'll figure out why she's living on her own in a tent as the story goes on. But this particular morning, she stumbles upon a house that is a little more isolated. Yeah. And there's a door that's open and she kind of wanders in. So it's got a little bit of a Goldilocks feel at this point, right?
Yeah.
She wanders into this house and she sees these painted stones. And the stones are all painted with images of the animals that are reflected in the Chinese zodiac. And the older cousin, who is like a young adult, I guess this guy's probably in his early 20s, something like that, who is sort of the head of the household, in an unusual household arrangement as well. Shigure has been the one painting these rocks, and so he kind of comes back in as Toru is standing there, and they start having a conversation about the Chinese zodiac. And Toru explains that her favorite story was always the story of the cat.
Yeah.
And the cat is not represented in the Chinese zodiac. You want to tell us about that?
So the story is about the Chinese zodiac. All the animals get invited to a banquet by God. And in this story, the rat plays a trick on the cat, who was invited to the banquet, but the rat, when he passed on his invitation, gave him the wrong day. And so the cat didn't get to come to the banquet, and God got mad at him and took him out of the zodiac.
Yeah, and so the idea is the cat never gets to be in the zodiac and is left out because the cat failed to answer the invitation and come to the banquet. Of course, not at all of the cat's fault.
Right.
And Toru, in one of our earliest introductions to her, recounts this story from the Chinese zodiac, but then also says, So I've always felt this special connection to the cat because I loved the cat, and she cried as a little girl when she heard the story because she felt so bad for the cat
She was
being
like,
left out.
I'll be the year of the cat. I won't be a dog anymore.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Because she was born in the year of the dog.
Yep.
And there is in this collection that you loaned me at the back of the book a bit of an explainer on the Chinese zodiac as well, which I thought was really, really helpful. So she meets, of course, this man, Shiguri, and she does not know him at this point, nor does she know that he is the cousin of and lives with the prince from school, Yuki.
It's just kind of funny, like, coincidence that she runs into him. And then, Yuki comes out of the house and he's like, oh, I hope my cousin wasn't being rude to you. And they end up walking to school together. And it's kind of interesting because as the prince of the school, all the girls at school really admire him from afar, but there's also kind of this universal understanding nobody talks to the prince. And in later volumes, like, you'll see more of kind of the bullying that goes along with that.
Okay.
Where girls kind of hold each other accountable and nobody's allowed to talk to him alone.
I see.
And they don't mean to be mean to him, but they mean to be mean to the other girls.
Sure. And we do see some of that in this volume.
Yeah.
And even in, like, friendly bullying and teasing, where, Toru, who had never had the nerve to speak to Yuki, the prince, before, is now walking to school with him, and she can't believe it. She's so excited that she's being honored to get to walk to school with this boy, and then at the same time, she wants to sort of keep distance when she arrives at school because she knows she's going to be teased by the other girls about walking with Yuki, both out of jealousy and out of just, I think, fun, with depending on which characters.
Because, like, with her friends, Hana and Arisa, they're both friendly teasing, like, I can't believe you walked here with him. And, kind of like, that kind of talk goes on with girls here where you, like, tease your friend because they're talking to the cute boy, but then there's also the mean side of that where the girls who are like, you can't talk to him, what are you doing?
Yeah, yeah. Something else about Yuki, though, is as I first read through this, my interpretation was there was also kind of an air of mystery about him, and not just because he was considered the prince and he was considered the handsome boy, but also in the way he carried himself.
Yeah.
And specifically, we're told about one instance where a girl tried to hug him and he pushed her on the ground.
Yeah.
And that was, it was very jarring. It was like, okay, so, he does seem like a nice young man and he's obviously a very handsome character, but I thought, why would people react to him the way they do, where there is sort of this magnetism around him when that's how he acts toward people? But I guess it has to be because there's this air of mystery. And as we get into the story, that little anecdote of a girl trying to hug him and him pushing her off of him and kind of freaking out makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And, look, I enjoyed this story a lot. As we get into it, this will become clear to our listeners. This story is weird.
Yeah.
And I like that about it. I like that about it a lot. And, the little bit that I have read manga, it's not much. But the little bit that I have read, I've enjoyed. And I have found that very often there is stuff that you would not have expected it to take some of the turns that it takes when you sit down. And I don't know whether a Japanese reader would be less surprised, than we are. But sometimes it's like, well, this is kind of a bonkers direction for this story to go.
You know how there are tropes in movies in certain genres? Mm-hmm. The tropes in Japanese literature are just different.
Yes.
And so there are some tropes that I have seen repeated in different manga, but there are some things that I'm like, that never came up again. That was just unique.
That was just something odd.
Something that is interesting that comes up a lot is that there is a lot less touching other people. Like in Western culture, we hug and it's not a big deal, right? In some cultures, you kiss in greeting. It doesn't matter who that person is. In Japanese culture, you're a lot more formal, and the type of language you use you can use different words to be more formal, which I think we have variations of that, but that it's more rigid in Japanese and some Asian cultures because theirs was grounded in like different social classes having different languages for a while.
Okay.
And a lot of that maybe is gone or less common or less meaningful now.
Sure.
But you'll see, or if you read more of Fruits Basket, they talk about Toru being super polite.
Okay.
And so I know that there's some translation that just doesn't come through when you take Japanese and go to English, because it doesn't feel like she's more formal than anybody else, but obviously in the original language she was.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Some other differences, like the touching, like it's even interesting because like between couples, you won't even hold hands, depending on, you know, where you are or how long you've been a couple or stuff. But there's also like some influencers, there's these YouTubers I watch who live in one of the Asian countries, and one of his dreams, he's from there and she's American, is that she would still speak to him formally, like call him Mr. whatever their last name is.
Okay.
Because he thinks that's super cute that like an old couple would do that, and that's like a dream for them. Whereas, you know, I think in Western culture, we want to call each other maybe like really cutesy nicknames and be very informal. Whereas for him, or for some people, being more formal feels more cutesy, which is just a very different way of thinking.
Oh, how interesting. Sure.
So Toru goes to school and she kind of gets teased and bullied a little bit. And then she goes home from there and we see more of Yuki and Shigure talking. We find out that Toru has actually decided to set up camp on their land.
Yeah, and so this is a discovery for them. They didn't know there was a tent on their land. When Toru walks into their house, they just, I guess, assume she's been walking through the woods. They don't really know what her purpose is or where she's come from. But separately, they discover there's a tent on their land. And Toru eventually admits to, that's where I live. And so they're like, you know, what's going on here? Why are you living in a tent? But on top of that, there is this big rainstorm that comes about. And part of the reason why this conversation is sort of forced so early in the story is because that tent is going to be washed away in a mudslide in this story.
Yeah. They're like, Shigure and Yuki are concerned for her safety. They're like, this is all Soma family property, so you can't be here, but also it's dangerous to be out in the woods by yourself. So why don't you just come spend the night at our house? Since you don't have somewhere else to stay, you're staying in a tent. It will be safer. And that night, there's a big rainstorm that causes a mudslide and carries her tent and all her belongings away.
Yeah, that's right. And she is so broken by this because one important thing that's carried away, I mean, first of all, it's what she has to live. But secondly, it's so important to her because she loses a photo of herself with her mother.
Yeah.
In this mudslide. And she tells her backstory then, which is her mother had died only a short time earlier, like 6 months earlier or something like that. She'd been living just with her mother. I think her father had died when she was very young. And so after the death of her mother, she went to live with her grandfather. And it was a very small house and didn't have much room. And at some point, the grandfather had decided was going to do some renovations. And he was invited to go live with another relative.
One of his other children.
That's right, yeah.
And their family, yeah.
That's right.
There was just room for him in their house. There wasn't room for Toru to come with. And so he said, do you think you could go live with a friend? And she said yes, because as we learn, Toru doesn't like to cause trouble.
Yeah.
She doesn't like to be a burden. I think a lot of that comes from losing her parents at a young age and seeing her family kind of bicker over who has to take care of her.
That's right. Yeah, it wasn't as though, and the grandfather had taken her in, but it was pretty clear that this wasn't the thing the grandfather was most excited about in life.
Yeah.
Was taking on this granddaughter.
Yeah, and it's clear that he loves her when you read more of it, but also he's older. This is not an easy thing for him to do.
Sure. Something else we learn about Toru during this period of time, too, is, so she said, sure, grandfather, I'll go stay with one of my friends. She doesn't have a lot of friends where she feels like she can make that request of. And so rather than...
She didn't want to be a burden.
That's exactly it.
So her two closest friends, she didn't even tell them what was happening because she didn't want them to be concerned. Mm-hmm. And she felt like they didn't have a house that she could stay in either. One of her friends, she says, Hana has a big family. Mm-hmm. which is so funny for me to think about because she has one brother.
Right.
And just, we have families here. Like, I have cousins who have 8 siblings, But her other friend's living situation is a little bit rougher, too. So she didn't feel like she could burden them with that. And that's how she ends up living in a tent.
Well, and, we see that another characteristic of Toru is she's a hard worker. So in addition to going to school, as much as any other high school student goes to school, she also has a job as a janitor.
Yeah.
And when she's working with this cleaning service, I mean, even her coworkers are commenting on how hard a worker it is, or how hard a worker Toru is, and that it's always an easier day for them when Toru is there because she's grateful to have the job.
Yeah.
And works as hard as she possibly can. This is a super likable character.
She's so lovely.
Yeah, she's a delightful young woman. She is. I mean, you mentioned just being polite. She's kind to everyone. She is very humble.
And she's very thoughtful.
Yeah.
Like, she sees other people's perspectives very easily.
Well, and I think in part of her not wanting to be a burden, it's because she can put herself in, her grandfather's shoes or her friend's shoes and say, I see how this would burden them, and so I don't want to make that imposition.
Yeah.
Well, simultaneous to us learning this about Toru and her background, we also know that these 2 young guys, Shigure and Yuki, who live apparently by themselves in this house on Soma family land, they also have a problem.
Yep.
And that is because they are just a couple of bachelors living on their own, they don't take out their trash.
Yes.
And they don't clean up after themselves. And they just, the art here depicts a room just like filled with garbage.
Yep, their kitchen.
And so they sort of feel like we need someone who is going to take care of the house around here.
Yeah.
And Toru, who makes her living cleaning things, also needs a house and a place to stay. And so this is going to be an arrangement of convenience where, very awkward, you have a man in his 20s, and you have a teenage boy and a teenage girl, and they're going to now live together. And it is an awkward arrangement.
Yeah.
And
I think that's part of, like, the setup of the book, right? That's a big part of, like, what drives what secrets they keep and when they finally reveal things to Toru's friends or other people that they know.
yeah. And, something else that is a lot of fun. So in American comics, we often get what we'll refer to as the back matter. So you've had the last page of the issue, and usually there's some ads or something like that. And then after that, you might have like a letters column. You might have a little essay from like the editor or sometimes from the writer. But sometimes you also have a letters column where people have emailed in after they read the prior issue or a couple issues back and said, hey, what about this? Or I loved that thing or whatever. And there is some of this, except it's done in the margins on the side of the page. And I felt like this really connected me to the author quite a bit. And those were very charming as well.
Yeah.
So you would occasionally have these little things that our writer and artist is telling us about herself. And some of them have to deal with why she crafted the story the way she did. And in this, she refers to wanting this to come off as a comedy.
Yeah.
And it does have a lot of humor in it. I wouldn't call it straight a comedy book by any means. But she's lacing that in. And then also just some stuff about herself she likes to tell.
She's a huge video gamer.
That's right. She's always talking about what video game she's playing right then. And it's so funny now to pick this up in, 2026. And she was writing this back in 1999. And she's talking about whatever game was popular then and responding to an audience that apparently had been sending in emails or letters to her about that same game. But the thing that really got me with one of these little narrative marginal notes was where she tells the audience that she got an internet connection.
Oh my gosh, that is so wild.
Isn't that
so
funny?
Crazy.
And she's talking about how like now she can play some video games online, but she's talking about how she's not sure whether she likes having the internet.
Yes.
Because, it's just this new technology and she doesn't know if that's going to change the way she lives and the way she interacts with the world. And it's like, you and I grew up during times where we remembered not having internet because it didn't exist or wasn't widely available in people's homes.
I got a computer and internet in my house early because my dad was in tech.
Okay.
So earlier than a lot of my friends did.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so strange to think about, like, that's just part of how we grew up.
Sure. Well, and I'll tell you, there's a good age gap between you and me here. I'm 45. You are, if you care to share.
I'm 38.
38. Okay. Yeah. So 7 years. I was in high school the first time I ever experienced the internet. Like, I went into the library at my high school during study hall, and they had a small computer lab off a room in the library, and you could sign up to connect to the internet. And it was just like there were these chat rooms, and it was just text, right?
Yeah.
And that's all that we were seeing, and to think back, like, so that would have been about 5 years before the writing of Fruits Basket too. And, it was very slow growing in those early days. People understood, like, the internet could be fun.
Yeah.
And it was something that could be a place where you could get information about stuff. But it hadn't been populated.
Right.
The world of the internet was still sparse then.
Well, and the people still thought of other ways. Oh, I don't need that. I can find that through this other method.
Right. You'd still go look in a book for something.
Right. I don't need that. I can make a phone call.
Yeah. Well, and, at that time, you also weren't so used to having all the information of the world at your fingertips that you didn't feel like you needed to have all the information of the world at your fingertips.
Well, I guess I can't remember. Oh, well.
That's right. You remember not knowing stuff. That's weird. Because even then, remember, the technology was slow to develop too. And so in 99, for the most part, you're still dealing with dial-up.
Oh, yeah.
At least, unless you were at some sort of like a school or a company or something like that.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to be on the internet because that meant nobody could make a phone call.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Oh, my goodness gracious. And so I mean, this is a bit of an aside from the story, obviously, but what a fun place to kind of go in your mind.
Yes.
As you're thinking about this young woman in Japan writing this story, who is obviously younger as well.
So we can pick up from Toru is at their house, and they've kind of made this arrangement where they'll kind of provide room and board and meals, and she'll clean the house and cook. Like, they'll pay for the food and she'll cook it. And this just works out really well because Shigure was talking about hiring somebody, but it not being in the budget. And Yuki was complaining about always eating out and nobody knowing how to cook and them not knowing how to clean. So it just kind of works out for both of them that they can do this. But then we get into some hijinks.
Yes.
So right as they're kind of getting things settled with Toru moving in, another character shows up, and this is Kyo. And Kyo kind of busts in. He actually breaks in through the roof.
Yeah, he makes quite an entrance.
And we immediately realize that Kyo and Yuki do not get along. And it's immediately like Kyo is going to fight Yuki and just way over the top.
Yeah, and when we say they don't get along and they're going to fight, I mean physically.
Yeah,
They're going to have a fists and feet, kicking fight.
Martial arts coming out right away.
That's right.
And Toru, being the kind person, wants to say, mediate and be like, don't fight, please. Fighting is bad. Who is this other person? She wants to kind of step in and say, maybe if we just talk about it. And in that, she stumbles into Kyo. And in this kind of big puff of smoke explosion, Kyo turns into a cat.
Right. So she doesn't just kind of, they don't just bang into each other, but sort of stumble into each other's arms like in an embrace.
Yes.
And he turns into a cat.
Turns into a cat.
So immediately we have something not normal that's going on here.
And it's so funny because she's like, he's a cat.
Right.
And so then kind of figuring out her being surprised by this, and you see Yuki and Shigure both going, what's all the noise? And oh dear. Like, they're not super surprised that this happened, but they are like, oh, this is a problem. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of keep going, and another number of events happen to where Toru's kind of like dashing around in a panic, And then she runs into Yuki and Shigure as well, and they turn into a rat and a dog.
Yes. And so eventually we're going to get that backstory.
Yeah.
We're going to find out that there is something special about the Soma family, and also why the Chinese zodiac was so interesting to them.
Yeah.
And it's also going to explain the relationship between Yuki and Shigure.
Yeah. And so we find out that the Soma family is living under a curse, where there are 12 family members who are cursed by the zodiac. And in the books, they're called the Junishi, which is just a Japanese word for zodiac. And so there are 12 members of the Soma family who, if they become very stressed or are hugged by a person of the opposite sex, they will turn into their animal form.
Yes.
And just that imagination, I'm like, where do you get these ideas? This is so funny.
It's a very off-the-wall idea. And that explains to us, though, immediately why these cousins dislike each other so much. Because if you'll recall, going back to the story that Toru loved so much when she was a little girl, about the cat. The cat is the outsider, and the cat has animosity toward the rat.
Yeah. And we'll also see like that each of the family members has personality traits that are reminiscent of the animal that they're cursed by. So like the cat and the rat, cat and mouse. Of course they're going to fight.
Yeah, right.
But there's also more in the story about why cats and rats fight, because the rat tricked the cat. And so it's like this anger is passed down from cursed family member to cursed family member.
And there's one other thing that we ought to explain about the changing of these characters into their animals, which is the Hulk problem for people who are familiar with the Incredible Hulk, which is, the Hulk was wearing regular clothes when Bruce Banner was when he turned into the Hulk, and those are torn to shreds.
Yep.
And so when he goes back to being normal sized, his clothes are all torn up.
Yeah.
Well, for these guys, I don't know that it's even that, because they're not getting bigger, they're getting smaller because they're turning into animals of animal size. But whenever they wake up is not the right term
Transform.
to use. Whenever they transform back into humans, they are naked when they do. And so, in addition to just the secret of their family being revealed and it freaking people out that they're a rat or a cat or whatever, there's also the embarrassment and maybe inappropriateness of suddenly presenting in public or wherever you are in the nude.
Yes. And you'll learn, or we learn throughout the story, that the amount of time they stay transformed varies. It's not a consistent I've been a rat for 5 minutes, so I should be turning back now. So it's just kind of unexpected. Yeah, so there's a lot of surprises.
There sure are. And that also helps us explain, too, why Yuki carries himself the way he does at school.
Yes.
He has to keep a bit of a reserve, especially knowing that he's a handsome boy, because he doesn't want these girls hugging on him and turning him into a rat.
Yes.
And then turning him into a naked boy in school.
Yes. Now, did you get to the point where I think they talked about modifying the memory?
Oh, yes. Yes.
So another big factor in him not wanting to transform accidentally is that there is a member of the family who can erase people's memories. And Yuki has sort of a traumatic memory of playing with a bunch of other kids and getting too caught up in the moment and hugging a girl and transforming. And none of the kids he was playing with were part of the family or in on the secret. And so all those kids and family members had to have their memories modified so that they wouldn't remember his curse.
That's right, yes. And that was an issue of concern as we get into the second chapter of the book.
Yeah.
Because, of course, this is all unbeknownst to Toru at this point, but Yuki and Shigure and Kyo even are having this conversation where they're like, we have to talk to, I guess, their grandfather.
Yeah.
About what happens next. And we can't defy his wishes. He's the senior member of the family who gets to make these calls. And we sure don't want to have to erase. They feel guilty about it when they do this. And they don't want to have to erase Yuki's memories.
Or Toru's.
Toru's, thank you very much. But they have a problem.
Yeah, and they have to speak to their head of the household, who we don't meet Akito in this book, I don't think.
We do not.
Okay. We don't meet Akito in this book, but later when we do meet him, it'll be kind of a shock that he's the same age as Toru and Yuki.
Oh, he is?
And he's more like a cousin or like a nephew almost to them.
You know, I just assumed it was a grandfather.
And the thing is, I think you're supposed to assume that.
Okay.
I think it's supposed to be kind of a shock.
Yeah.
That this person is so young and younger than many of the members of the Zodiac.
Oh, wow. Who have to answer to him. Mm-hmm. Oh, so interesting. Well, fortunately, Akito relents. And he says, okay, this is a weird situation you guys are in, but you don't have to erase Toru's memory, but she has to be sworn to secrecy, basically.
Yeah.
And she is very quick to agree to that. And again, she expresses it almost in these terms. I don't want to be trouble for your family. And so don't worry, I will never give your family trouble.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about this conversation, so Yuki's having this conversation with Toru where he's saying, we may have to erase your memory. And he's very upset about it. He doesn't want to have to do that because he doesn't get to get close to people. As we've said, he has to be reserved. And Toru does this thing where she says, if they do erase my memory, that's okay. I understand. You have to keep your family secrets. Will you still be my friend?
Isn't that beautiful? It's awesome.
And it like conjures up so many emotions in me. And I think that's why I really love this story, is because she's so heartfelt.
Yes.
And there are little moments like that where the characters kind of give each other this grace and understanding that's really heartfelt and really helps them kind of develop and get through early, like the things that have gone wrong, like their own trauma and depression and things like that.
And I'll tell you, I will... we always try to put up some images of the art on our Instagram page, at Graphic Novel Apostle on Instagram. And I'll put up a picture of this page as well, because it really is sweet. And at this time, when Yuki is talking to Toru, he is still in his rat form. And it's really adorable to see on the page. You have this young girl, and she is, down on her knees, looking down at this rat who is kind of standing upright and looking at her. And she is being so sweet. Yuki has just expressed his own feelings about this situation, his own discomfort with it. And her answer is, please, do whatever will make your family most comfortable. I found out such a big secret that you have to talk to the head of your family about it. You can't help that. But then, and this is in another panel, and, of course, we have the manga style of drawing where a lot of times when a character is being very expressive, their eyes are drawn really big.
Yeah.
And here that is very much the case. So we have this sort of like face-on panel where this sweet girl with these very big eyes is looking at us. And she says, there is one thing. Please, if my memories are erased, will you still be my friend? And then there's just an all-black panel, and it says, I'll be sad to forget, though. And then a white panel with nothing else in the background. They took me into their house unconditionally. When they found out I was living in a tent, I was so very happy, but I'll bear with it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This girl is wonderful.
Oh, yeah. So sweet. And there are a lot of moments like that where she helps these characters kind of overcome things that have been really difficult for them. And you don't expect it at first, but they also help her. Because she, the more you learn about her, the more you learn, like, how she lost her mom and things like that, how kind of traumatic it's been, but how she's always put on a cheerful face. And she is genuinely cheerful and kind, but it still kind of hurts. And a lot of people don't think about it hurting because she is so positive.
Yeah. And part of that is because she doesn't let anybody else see what her struggles are.
Yeah.
And she's embarrassed by them.
Yeah.
But part of that is just her nature to want to not ask anyone else to carry her burden.
Yeah. And she's always thinking about other people, and I feel like I know people like that in real life, you know, who are really good at taking care of others and seeing other people's needs, but forget to think about their own needs.
Yeah. It usually are the helpers.
Yes.
You know, those are the people who are the Toru type. And Toru really brings a ray of light into this house, too. It doesn't seem like Sugure and Yuki were living an unhappy life before, although they were surrounded by trash in their house. But it was less full.
Yeah.
And so she really brings a ray of light into this home. And, you know, I guess what we learn about Kyo is that sometimes he resides there, which is kind of like a cat, too, really.
Yeah.
You know, he lives off by himself in the woods.
So each member of the cursed members of the family have to get special permission to do anything, to go anywhere, to move out. So part of their family structure is that people who are maybe further related get to live outside the property.
Okay.
But they can live like closer to the family. Like there's a big family property. People who know the secret or are cursed have to live within like the inner grounds. And so they have to have special permission to go to school or to live anywhere else. And so Shigure has gotten this permission, and Yuki requested special permission to go to his school because it's not an all-boys school.
That's right. And it runs the risk of exposing the family secret.
Yeah.
That's right. And one of the things that Kyo had gotten permission to do was to move out of the house for 6 months and to go off into the woods by himself to train. And he wants to train in martial arts because all he wants is to fight and defeat his cousin Yuki.
Yeah. You find out a lot more about his motivation and why that is later in the series.
Okay.
You also find out that all the cursed members of the family have the same sensei or martial arts teacher. And so they're all accomplished martial artists.
Okay.
And so when Yuki and Kyo fight, this is two black belts.
Okay.
Like, this is not people who are just goofing around or don't know what they're doing. It's people who have good control over what they're doing and know how to fight.
But at this early point in the series, apparently Kyo is either less skilled or just not as far along in his training.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Yuki was a character I liked from the very beginning, but when you see the way he treats Kyo with the just utter disdain and then disrespect even in their fights, where he will, you know, sort of without looking, you know, make a side punch that throws Kyo in a very dramatic way through the door or the wall of the house or something. And so it's a very unequal fight at the beginning, at least.
There is one scene that sticks out in my mind where after Kyo has gotten permission to move into Shigure's house, and he also transfers to Toru and Yuki's school, that he gets up in the morning and he does his training, and Toru's like, "Oh, you're up so early." And then Yuki comes down in this half sleepy state. And Toru says, "I'm so proud of you, Yuki, that you don't attack him when he's half asleep." And Kyo says, "He's stronger when he's half asleep." And it makes me so angry because that means he's holding back the rest of the time.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Is that one in this volume?
Yeah, you know, it is.
Okay.
And I had forgotten that, but you're right. That really does kind of stand out.
It's funny because you see this over and over where Kyo initiates the fight, but Yuki ends it. He's like, "I'm done putting up with you being silly and attacking me, and I'm just going to one-punch you."
Which he does, and usually ends up destroying some portion of the house.
Yes.
And it seems like they spend a lot of money and time rebuilding walls and doors and holes in the roof.
And to be clear, this is a Japanese traditional house.
Okay.
Doors are made of paper.
Okay.
So, like, it's not like going through drywall or an oak door. These are lighter pieces of furniture or
Fair.
wall. There's some traditional Japanese housing where the walls are completely removable
Okay.
to rearrange the house for summer versus winter.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of like helps you understand why they're able to destroy things so easily.
I see.
But he did bust through the roof.
Yes.
Which I don't think was as fragile. So there's also just some silliness.
Well, I'll tell you, something that surprised me was, you know, Kyo's introduction, as you explained a few minutes ago, is him dropping through the roof into the room that that Toru is in.
Yeah.
And she has never seen this person before. She doesn't know he's a member of the family. And he comes in aggressively because this was going to be like a sneak attack, basically, on Yuki. And I would have thought that right away, the way that what the storyteller was doing was setting up a hero and a villain. And that Yuki was going to be the hero and that Kyo was going to be the villain. But Toru, once she gets herself dusted off and figures out what's going on, really wants to just welcome this new member of the family in, wants to figure out what the source of all this conflict is between Yuki and Kyo, and also wants to build a bridge between the two of them. And because Kyo is the cat, which is the animal that she identifies with the most, and she already has a special feeling for the cat, especially the cat in the zodiac, which Kyo is the real-life representation of. She has a special affinity toward him. And at least through this first volume, I knew there was a romance element to this story. And I thought it was going to be kind of the will they, won't they building of love between Toru and Yuki. Mm-hmm. But at least through this first volume, eventually Kyo sort of becomes maybe a rival in love as well here. And I think that in some ways, Toru's feelings are inclined toward Kyo.
Yeah, there's definitely a build throughout most of the series where you don't know, like, if she likes Yuki or Kyo. Like, it could go either way for a long time. And I think that's kind of part of the fun of reading a romantic comedy is, like, figuring out who likes who,
Yeah.
That is true in the anime as well. Like, you have this strong feeling, like, that she really cares about Yuki. They have a lot of heart-to-hearts, a lot of deep meaningful conversations, but then you also see that between her and Kyo. And so you're like, oh. And, I think that early on in this series, there were a lot of readers who wrote in and said, like, who they wanted her to fall in love with, who they wanted her to date. And it's so interesting because it took me a long time into the series before I really felt like I knew who it was going to be. But you've called it out right from the beginning.
Oh, is that right? So,
Yes.
So big spoiler here, and of course we always do spoilers here, but so she is going to end up with Yuki then.
Yeah. What? No, with Kyo.
Oh, with Kyo. Oh my goodness.
Did I misunderstand you?
Yeah, I really thought, well, I guess I was saying I assumed it was going to be Yuki, and then I saw that Kyo was going to be a player in this relationship too. But I still just assumed that in the end, she'd come back around to Yuki.
No, and it's kind of carried out like that for a long time, and you see Yuki feels so protective towards her and so caring. But as we get further into it, he sees her, spoiler, he sees her as a mother figure.
Okay.
Because he didn't have like a good mom. And the way that she cares for their house and cooks for them and takes care of them, and like he gets really sick at some point and she kind of steps in to like make sure you take care of yourself.
Sure.
That he realizes I thought that I liked her like a girlfriend, like romantically for a while, but then I realized I just see her as very dear family. And
oh, how interesting. Yeah, that's not where we're left at the end of the first volume,
No,
I don't think.
no.
And I should correct something. I had been saying this is chapters 1 through 4 in this first volume. It's the first 6 chapters included here.
that's my bad too.
Oh, no, well, it's all right. I think the audience will forgive us.
Yeah. So Toru's kind of settling into this new family, right? And we've got Shigure and Yuki and Kyo. And it's interesting because we immediately see like Toru really caring for them and wanting to know more about them. And since it's okay, like she gets to keep their secret, right? She doesn't have to lose her memory. She wants to learn more about them. Like she's so thoughtful and caring. She's really like wanting to learn what their interests are and like maybe I can help Yuki and Kyo get along better if I understand more of them. And so she has this moment with Yuki where she says, still be my friend.
Yeah.
And then we get to more of a moment like that with Kyo. So Kyo enrolls in their school, and we really see a contrast between Kyo and Yuki at school. Whereas Yuki is very reserved and can feel standoffish because of how he wants to protect himself. Kyo is a lot more casual, and he seems to make friends a lot more easily. And a lot of the guys immediately start teasing him and kind of like pulling him into their groups. And Toru is like very observant of these differences. And we kind of learn more about Kyo's background, that because he's an outcast in his family, he can be accepted by outsiders.
Okay.
And because Yuki is accepted by his family, he has to be an outcast in society. Mm-hmm. And it kind of reminds me of how, like, when you've grown up in two cultures or learning two languages, both of them will feel like you don't know or don't have a strong enough accent or something.
Sure.
You know,
don't
like,
quite belong in either.
Yeah, and so Yuki talks to Toru about feeling kind of like an outcast. And Toru's like, I mean, he has so many good qualities. He sees these good qualities in Kyo that he can be easily accepted, but he doesn't see how popular he is and how genuinely kind he is. And then she has a similar conversation where Kyo says things that he is jealous of Yuki for, that he's accepted in the family. And he also tells Toru, like, the reason he wants to fight Yuki isn't because he just hates him. Mm-hmm. It's because Aikido has told him, if you can defeat the rat, mm-hmm. then the cat can become part of the zodiac.
Okay.
And so there's this outside force manipulating them. Mm-hmm. And we see this more with Aikido. We don't see Aikido's face for a while in the series, but we do keep seeing how he kind of needles the family to try to push these. It's almost like he's trying to direct some sort of like soap opera to play out in front of him.
Okay.
And
it does.
And it does. But Toru kind of has this conversation with Yuki and Kyo separately, not together, but with each of them that, hey, you have great qualities, and, you know, you see these qualities over here in the other person, but you have great qualities too. And she goes on this really cute analogy. So she talks about rice balls. Okay. Which is basically a ball of rice. Yeah. And then you press like something to flavor it into one side. Okay. And apparently a pickled plum is a very good one because they're very excited about there being a pickled plum. Uh-huh. You know, and there's a lot of things like that where I'm like, I don't understand this, but I can, from context, gather that this is a good thing.
Hey, I had a good calzone earlier today.
Exactly.
I get it.
So she's talking about maybe the reason you can't see your good qualities is because it's in your back. That the flavor is put in your back. If you're a rice ball, the pickled plum is in your back. You have one. And Kyo, in typical teenage fashion, says, "You're weird." But you also see, like, he takes it to heart. Yeah. And in a later conversation, he can see that Toru is having a hard time. But she doesn't want to be a burden so bad that she neglects herself. And he says to her, you can be mad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be upset. And for a person like that, it's so important for them to hear, it's okay to have your own feelings. Right. And it's okay to, like, be a burden sometimes. And I think that's what Kyo really does for her, is, like, helps her grow that way to not try to hold everything on her own shoulders. Mm-hmm.
It is sweet. I mean, there are lots of scenes that are just touching in this story.
Yeah, and it's very funny because you've got this interesting juxtaposition between the really zany comedy and then these really touching moments that could hit wrong, but I feel like this story gets it right. I feel like there are a few stories out there that really get that balance right.
Yeah. You know, and you and I talked about how we would approach the plot of this book, and we've talked about a lot of the plot elements. Yeah. And I think those are important to just understand what the story is. But I think the more important part of this story really is talking about the characters. Yeah. Which I think our conversation has naturally drifted toward. Because this is, you know, I asked you that maybe foolish question at the very beginning about like what genre you would classify this in. And maybe it's a character piece more than anything else.
Yeah, and if I think about this first volume, the first 6 chapters, I think the big theme here is this feeling, the theme is kind of like each of these characters feels like an outcast in some way, but they all help each other feel less like outcasts.
You are exactly right.
They all find a way to feel more accepted.
This book, I think the big theme, and we would have totally missed it if we had not come around to this.
Yeah.
I think the big theme of this book is belonging.
Yeah.
It's finding your place.
And that continues through the series. There's this continued theme of acceptance and finding belonging, and what is like, how do you get to that point? How are you able to accept yourself, and how are you able to accept others?
Yeah. But there is sort of one more little twist, which is the introduction of another character toward the end of this first volume. This is their cousin Kagura.
Yeah. And Kagura comes in with a bang.
Tell us about that.
So Kagura comes in and she seems really shy, and Toru's like first impression of her is like, oh, what a shy, cute little girl. And then she gets in visual range of Kyo, and you just see Kyo like go, oh no. And Kagura just yells his name and is charging into him and hugs him. And we learn another secret. Members of the Zodiac can hug each other and not transform.
Yes.
And so, obviously, Kagura is another member of the Zodiac, but it takes Toru a while to kind of piece everything together.
Yes. And Toru is excited because there's a girl.
Yeah.
There's another girl. She's here with all these boys. And so she knows there's another member of the family. And at this point, I think she's pretty well decided. She's into the life of the Soma family.
Yeah, she wants to know them. She wants to help when she can. And there's also a bit like in each book where she meets a new member of the Soma family. She's like, are they a member of the Zodiac? And she's like, she wants to meet them all.
Yeah, yeah. And that is contrasted by the actual members of the family at least that we're engaging with in this volume, who really feel like it's a curse to be part of this family.
Yeah.
And a part of that is, I'm sure you'll know better than me, that there are things about this family that she doesn't know yet.
Yeah.
The ugly side. And of course, part of it is being there's a child that they're answering to, or a peer of age that they are answering to.
Well, and we learn that because Akito is the head of the family and has directed them to keep this a secret, so much so that people who find out, their memories have to be erased, and has really isolated each of these members of the Zodiac to where the only other people they can really open up to is other members of the Zodiac. But we also learn that Akito is like needling and creating conflict between those members. And Toru brings in this acceptance and kind of teaches them you can get along.
Yeah.
And to kind of she negates a lot of that stuff that Akito is doing and helps them be stronger together.
Well, it sounds like this would set up some conflict between Toru and Akito eventually in the story. And we're talking quite a bit about Akito, a character we never see in the volume that I have read. So is that true? Does that manifest?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, you remember how when Kyo was first introduced, you said you thought this was set up for a hero and a villain with Yuki and Kyo. Toru doesn't see villains.
Okay.
She sees people who are hurting and who need help, and she sees problems that can be fixed. And so she thinks about Akito's side. And I think in a lot of stories, nobody would think about Akito's side.
Right.
Because Akito is set up like the villain. But the resolution to this story isn't for the bad guy to get their comeuppance.
Okay.
It is a resolution that helps everyone kind of be better versions of themselves.
Oh, I love it.
And I think that's another reason why this story stands out so much to me, is because that's such a different ending than most stories.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So Kagura is going to have some conflict with Toru here.
Yeah.
At first.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got to develop this relationship. And the reason being is, as you were describing Kagura, it was reminding me of... Did you watch Animaniacs growing up? Okay. That was a show that I was just on the older edge of being the right age for that show. There was a character, I think this was on Animaniacs, a little girl with red hair who loved animals, and she would always get around these animals, and she'd be like, I just want to love them and squeeze them, and and so all the animals, whenever this little girl came around, her eyes would get real big, and their eyes would get real big, and they'd like flee, they'd go running off because she wanted to have these pets, and she just couldn't be gentle with them. She loved them too much.
That is Kagura.
That's Kagura, right?
Yeah.
And so while Toru is going to see a girl that she can form a sisterhood with, Kagura is going to see maybe a rival in love for the cousin Kyo.
Yeah.
And what is it? There's something where like they're pledged to be married if certain thing comes about in life.
So Kagura charges in, and she just explodes with new information every once in a while. She attacks Kyo. She like punches him. Mm-hmm. And then she goes, I just love you so much, and just hits him. And then she goes, who did this to you? Like, and you see like Shigure and Yuki in the background being like, you. But, and they're joking, and Toru is saying, is she a Zodiac member? And they're like, yeah, can you guess which one? And she's like, I guess you're supposed to be able to guess from her personality. That's really full bore charging in what she is. Mm-hmm. And she's the year of the boar.
Okay.
And we don't get to see that until the very end, but... and I feel like I'm jumping around. But she's got this really big personality that's shy and quiet at first. But then once she gets going, she is so loud. And she's a lot of fun. But yeah, she busts out with this information that she and Kyo are engaged to be married. There's an episode where it's like Valentine's Day, and she's like, did you get me chocolate? And, this comes up several times, and... you do kind of wonder, like, oh, but Toru and Kyo kind of seem like they're getting along, and maybe they're going to be romantic interest. And Kyo doesn't seem to return Kagura's affection. Mm-hmm. Like, he's not like, yes, hello, and I'm here for a hug. He's like, please get her away from me.
Sure.
As you would be if somebody beat you up.
Yes, for sure. By the way, and I need to correct the record here. This is important. It wasn't Animaniacs. It was Tiny Toons.
Tiny Toons,
and the character's name was Elmira. And, he has the reaction that the animals have to Elmira in Tiny Toons. That's exactly right.
Yeah. I've seen that in Bugs Bunny.
Okay.
But I didn't know it came from Animaniacs.
Yeah, well, no, so Tiny Toons.
Oh, Tiny Toons. My bad.
Well, this first volume is a really fun introduction to these characters, and certainly to our main character, Toru, and to the story moving forward. I'll tell you, I enjoyed this a lot. Yeah. I probably will not read the rest of it. I read a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
and I like this. And so I don't want to give the impression that like it wasn't good enough to keep reading. It was slow reading for me, in part because I think there were probably cultural things that were little stumbling blocks for me along the way, but also in part, I had a hard time following the action sometimes.
Okay.
And I thought the art was well done. It's, obviously very different from American comic art, but there was a lot of the action that I had to spend more time looking at than I would have expected to. And maybe that's because it's black and white, and maybe with color it would look different to me. Maybe it's just because this is an artist I'm not quite so familiar with. But for whatever reason, it was a long read.
I also think that there's something to be said about having to read backwards.
Sure.
Because in manga, you start at what we in the West would call the back of the book.
Yeah.
And you're having to retrain yourself to read right to left.
Yep.
Like, the words obviously go left to right, but you start in the top right of the page and work your way down. And learning to interpret, like, the boxes of the pictures and which way the artist wants you to go. I find myself rereading a page a couple of times sometimes And I found that the best thing to do in that situation is for me just to read it a couple times and be like, oh, it makes the most sense this direction.
You know what? I did that some too. I really did. And also, I mean, the panel structure is not rigid. Mm-hmm. And that's, I like when comic book artists will, sometimes dispense with the panels altogether. Or it can be something exciting in the storytelling to break the panels. But there were enough times in this where maybe it was a combination of reading right to left across the page, at least in terms of the panel order, and the panels not necessarily following a strict order.
Yeah.
That I was like, I read several pages a couple of times to decide which was the one that made more sense.
I was curious about that because I do feel like manga doesn't have a rigid order most of the time. Like, there's a general order that you can understand, and like as you read more manga becomes more automatic.
Yeah.
Like, I picked up a comic book the other day and started reading it the wrong way, and I was like, oops, let me start over.
How funny.
Because I've just been reading a lot of manga lately. But I do feel like manga breaks the bounds of those boxes a lot more often. Like, there will be not like a full spread image, but illustrations break out of their box and flow into the next box a lot more often than I think maybe they do in Western comics. Would you say that seems true? Or am I just underread in comics?
You know what? It depends on what era the comic is coming from.
Oh.
In modern comics, and I think it is fair to say that lots of modern comic book artists are heavily influenced by manga. And I know that manga is very popular with comic book creators.
Yeah.
I would guess, this is just my estimation, that maybe even it is more so popular with comic creators than it is with comic book readers and fans.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and so you see a lot of that now. But really, I mean, maybe over the last 30 years, there's been more of that panel breaking. And it's just as the art form develops, people think of new and creative ways to engage their audiences. But it was harder for me to translate it here than it is in an American comic book for whatever reason. But still, a very enjoyable read. And I like that you've given us a taste of what is ahead. And I'm so glad that... thank you for bringing this to me. This is a book I never would have picked up on my own. And I'm glad to know how much you like it. And you were telling me a few minutes ago, too, during we had taken a break, that the anime for Fruits Basket had another sort of cultural crossover for you, at least in terms of your personal fandom of things.
Oh, yeah. So the reason I got into Fruits Basket was because I watched the anime first. And the lead character, Toru, is voiced by a voice actor named Laura Bailey. And a few years later, we started watching another show on YouTube called Critical Role. People out there who are fans will know.
Well, and it's a Dungeons & Dragons type game. It's a role-playing podcast. You're essentially watching people play. Is that right?
So it's called a live play.
Okay.
And I'm new to Dungeons & Dragons as well. Also a thing that I discovered after being married, but I really love. But it's an actual play or a live play where they play this game that is a game where you kind of like piece together a story together. And you kind of decide like what your characters are able to do with rules and rolls of dice. And you fight bad guys. But they play this game and we watch the story develop, and it's really cool because it's like part improv, part storytelling, and Laura Bailey, the voice of Toru, is one of the main characters. She's always been on the show, and they've had 3 seasons now to where she's been 3 different characters and 3 different stories. But it was so funny to like see her be there and then be like, her voice is familiar, and realize that she also voiced one of my favorite characters, and just to kind of revisit that and see like I'm a big Laura Bailey fan now.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Well, Hannah, this has been awesome. Thank you for your patience with me. Really, thank you for your patience, and thank you for occasionally, popping over to me and saying, "Hey, we gonna do this thing or what?" Because this is so enjoyable.
Yeah.
I'm really glad we got to do this. I'm glad we got another opportunity just to kind of sit down and hang out, too. And to all of our listeners, I hope you guys will check this out, too. It's something very different from most of what we cover here on the podcast. But boy, it's been a fun experience for me.
Well, thank you for reading it and trying something that is probably outside of your usual interests. Listening to your podcast, I've realized that you really have a place in your heart for horror and kind of cop drama kind of things.
Sure.
And, I like some romance too. So thank you for...
I'll tell you what, I just like good storytelling.
Yeah.
And this is good storytelling. And
It is.
so awesome. And to all of our listeners, thank you for coming along with us on this ride too. We'll look forward to seeing you back here. And actually, probably our next episode will be another one with Chad Toppy, where we dive back into the human target.
Oh, how
So
fun.
yeah, we'll get back into some more of our crime noir, which is where I love the most. But anyway, y'all come back. Until then, keep reading those comics.